However, each of the ORITs, each of the 5 ORITs are different. Now, once we come to define and accurately define what does ORIT mean, what is the root? The Ethiopic root of ORIT is araya. What does araya mean? What does this root araya? See, if you don't understand what araya is, then you really don't understand what ORIT is. So the best thing you can do is to interpret it as being Torah. You understand? Torah is the ORIT. But what is the root of ORIT? Araya. And then from this word we get an example. An example. You understand? From the root of this word, it's a beautiful is word, and we're going to actually go through this word in full detail. But what we want to do right now, since it's the beginning of another yearly cycle, another 54 sabbatical readings. Now we know that in the Hebrew it's called Bereshith, or we say Berasit, 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 in the head, in the beginning. So we want to touch on this particular book because it's the first book, and it's important for us to put it into context. See, once we put this first book into context, the book that you know as Genesis, that the Jews call Bereshith, we call, from a more proper rendition of the Hebrew, Berasit, or literally Bereishith. Bereishith, Berasit, Bereishith means in the head, in the ras, or in the female head, because of that last final tau. The te sound is the feminizing of ras, you understand, or in the female head, in the beginning. And now this book in the Ethiopic, in His Imperial Majesty's Bible, the Metaf Kedus, is ORIT ZE-FITRET, the Torah, the perfect example of what? The law and the order, the perfect example, of Fitret, of the creation. Of the creation. See, they will say that the book's name is from the first word. That's because among the so-called Jews, they lost the idea of what the title was. You see, but the true title of that first book was maintained in the ancient Tob, or Tobia, in the good land that we know as the highland, or Ethiopia. And it was maintained in the Ethiopic and Hebrew manuscripts as ORIT ZE-FITRET originally. So when we look in the Ge'ez, it's ORIT ZE-FITRET, the Torah, or the perfect example of law and order of ZE-FITRET. And Lidet means the birth. Interesting. The Ge'ez says the Torah of the birth, or birthing, and the Royal Amharic of Negus Negest, of our Godfather, says ZE-FITRET, of the creation. Now see, these words, these Ethiopic words and these Amharic words, as the Hebrew words, as any word in any language, have meanings. Many of the true etymological, the true word meanings have been lost. And what we need to recover in order to recover our sanity about such important and vital matters, especially when we want to speak about spirituality, must be recovered. You see, it's impossible to walk in spirit and in truth if you don't have the spirit and the truth of what you're talking about, or the word. It's like if I were to minister to a Jamaican audience, right, and I was speaking Ge'ez, how many of the Jamaicans would understand the Ge'ez? They probably wouldn't. If I was speaking to an audience who basically only understood patois, and I was speaking so-called super proper English from America, you know what I'm saying, not even British English, but American English, how would they, or I was speaking down south, country slang, some things they would understand, but it would not be as perfect a communication unless I spoke to the people, in other words, in their language or in a language which they could properly comprehend. You see, and this is where translators and those who do translations, this is where the good translators are to be praised. There are, I just call to say that bad translators. You know what I'm saying? Because it depends on the limit of their knowledge. Because you remember, a translator has to both know the language that they're translating fairly well as the language that they're translating into. What happens with a lot of translators is that a lot of the translators generally will know one language far better than they know the other language. In other words, one of the languages they will only have a general idea of. So what happens is certain ideas are not fully communicated. And this is what we have in the King James Version of the Bible. And because these ideas are not properly communicated in the fullness, but at the time the authors try their best. Let's just give them that they attempted to translate whatever version, whether it was the Vulgate, and most likely the King James Version of the Bible was majorly translated from the Vulgate and the Greek, with the Hebrew most likely a distant third. But the Vulgate, it shows that the Vulgate and Septuagint were the primary. I mean, you can see it in a lot of words. You can see it in a lot of the names of the books. The names of the books of the Bible tells us essentially where they were translating it from. Because if they were translating it from the Hebrew, why would they have such a name? You know what I'm saying? Why would they have such a name? So what language were they translating when they got Genesis? The Latin or the Greek? The Septuagint or the Vulgate? People say the Hebrew. It was diligently compared with the Hebrew, but they were not translating from there. In other words, when they came across certain areas that the Vulgate and the Greek could not give them enough information, then they consulted with the limitation of their knowledge of biblical Hebrew. They consulted with the Hebrew and certain known areas that had been more fully translated from the Hebrew by others, and they compared this and then came up with a certain phraseology for the King James Version of the Bible. But it's very important for us to start at the beginning. But before we can even start at the beginning of the book, we need to put certain things in context in Genesis. For example, we need to put the background of the author. Who was the author of Genesis? Who was the author of this first book of the Bible? They tell us that it was Moses. It was Moses. Now the question we have to ask ourselves was, what was Moses, or what was Moses' education? Well, the Bible tells us that Moses was learned in all the wisdom of the Egyptians. But then, here's what's sadly very interesting, but in a sad sort of way. Because when it says that Moses was learned in all the wisdom of the Egyptians and powerful in word and deed, when it says Egyptians, we need to scrutinize that, because in the Ethiopic, the translation would be not that he was learned in all the wisdom of the Egyptians, but of the Egypts. So here, even here, Gerald Macy on page, was that 113 of Gerald Macy's lectures, where he says that there was a Gladstone, you understand, one named Gladstone, that was one of these turn-of-the-century writers about these biblical things, and he said that Mr. Gladstone has the reckless confidence to declare that the Hebrew account of creation had no Egyptian marks upon it. Then Gerald Macy retorts, that would indeed be strange if it had been written by a man who was a master of the wisdom of Egypt. Now, Gerald Macy is right on point, but what Gerald Macy couldn't know but probably had an inkling of, and this is what's very, very interesting, we're going to touch on this.